This may seem out of left field since this camera is not new, but the 5D Mark IV should have been a great video camera. But why wasn't it? Or at least, why wasn't it perceived as one? Well, aside from just terrible dynamic range, it had a really bad crop factor that really put people off. It wasn't really a full-frame shooter anymore. What you're looking at here is just standard video footage captured out of it in 4K at 24p, and you know what? It doesn't look bad. But what's more, after this camera was released, Canon addressed one of the major glaring issues with the camera, which was dynamic range as mentioned. They gave it C-Log. So now, looking back at it, and after using this camera extensively over the past year, where does it stand now? Let's take a look. So as mentioned, this is just a regular 4K video clip captured in standard picture profile at 4K 24p, and it's at f10 or so because it was really bright outside, but I just did want to show you, like, you're going to use this camera in bright light likely, so how does it handle out there? This looks fine. It's kind of flat, but, you know, fine. But what happens when you switch it to neutral, which used to be your go-to for addressing something that didn't have C-Log in it? Maybe you could get some more color out of it. Honestly, I don't see a big difference here. Yeah, it's slightly less saturated, but I'm not getting any more dynamic range out of it. Where the real fun happens is when you pull this and give it C-Log, and C-Log does a heck of a lot to completely change how you view this. Look at that. There is way better color rendition. This is straight out of camera. I haven't done anything to this. I haven't even graded it yet. And you can see how much better this image looks when you put C-Log in it. I am a huge proponent of adding C-Log to all of Canon's video cameras. And it still baffles me to this day how they didn't ship the 1DX Mark II with C-Log, because it would have been an amazing video camera. It already is. It would have been even better. The 5D Mark IV was a bad video camera made, well, pretty good because of C-Log, and we have to applaud them for that. It's just really unfortunate that it took them until after it went to market to address this problem. They should have known that the dynamic range was going to be an issue, especially when combined with the crop factor that was a major complaint. But when you look at this, compared to standard, it's really quite nice. We're going to do a couple other comparisons so that you can see exactly what's going on, but first I want to show you the different levels of C-Log that are available on the camera, because yes, you can alter them. So while we clear our eyes, like clearing our palette with, again, a standard picture profile shot here taken on the 5D Mark IV, we're going to go into the C-Log settings. Now in C-Log you're allowed to pick a sharpness setting, and we're going to take a look at the differences among them. So this is the C-Log of the same exact shot. You'll notice the colors are very different, and this is the sharpness set to 0. And we're going to take a look at it as we go up in sharpness level 1, 2, 3, all the way up to its highest setting, which is 7. Now while you're looking at this, I'm just going to let you decide what you like. What I decided to use when I'm shooting in C-Log is right in the middle, about 3. I found that anything after that started to look a little bit artificially sharp, like things aren't supposed to be that sharp, and things aren't sharp in the right way. It's hard to describe. I guess the only way I could really describe it is if you go into the Lumetri color panel in Adobe Premiere, you'll see the ability to sharpen something in post, and this is like taking that after the fact sharpness slider as high as you can take it, and it just starts to look really artificial. If you like that, or if that's a look you're going for, a specific style, it isn't definitely an option for you. But for shooting regular things, even the sharpness level 4, I found that it was making people look very strange when I was shooting interview footage. So I shied away from that the second that I accidentally went higher than I wanted to. And in this last frame, I want to just remind you what they all look next to each other, since that was a bit long and it can be hard to remember what sharpness looks like when you're given that much eye candy for that long. So on the left is the sharpness at 7, the middle at sharpness at 0, and then on the far right is what the standard picture profile looks like. So here's another shot taken in C-Log, and when I shoot in log, I generally try and overexpose by a couple stops, and that's the case here. This allows you to pull more shadows, and then you have more dynamic range in the highlights, so it's less of a big deal. You can see what I mean when we pull a Rec 709 LUT over the top of this, and you can, there it is, you see all the colors that really pop. We don't actually lose any of the highlights, the shadows are all there. This is what I consider to be a very, very good looking shot. I'm really pleased with how the C-Log can interact with the editing that you're doing. So this to me looks really good, and for comparative purposes, this is the exact same camera settings but in standard, and you can see how blown out this is. In order to get it to look similar to the C-Log, I came down, this is 2 stops closed down for basically the same proper exposure. So originally in this scene I was trying to test how good the shadow recovery would be, but when I got it back to my computer I realized this test was better for something else, because in both cases the shadows are pretty well exposed. I'm going to drop in an adjustment layer over the top where I can show you where I've kind of tried to bring the highlights down and the leaves in the background, as well as try and bring the shadows up in the foreground so that we can get a nice revealed scene, and honestly this looks pretty good. This is the standard profile in the Canon 5D Mark IV and I like it. On the exact same shot, exact same settings in C-Log, you're going to see me, I'm going to drop it on now. The highlights look better in the background, that is without a doubt, but I'm not really a fan of much of what's going on in the shadows. There's some weird bluing going on where we're losing some of the detail, and then I tried to bring up the shadows a little bit in this slight adjustment, and we've lost contrast, and it's pretty obvious to me here that shadows are not C-Log's strong suit, at least on this camera. It's better at highlights. Here I'm going to show how the Canon 5D Mark IV in C-Log does at different ISOs. And I'm going to start it at just the C-Log, and then I'll drop in a Rec 709 over the top of it so you can see how it grades. Now through this I do want to say my personal opinion, which is that at every ISO the Canon 5D Mark IV in C-Log is performing extremely well. I'm seeing minimal noise, I'm seeing great color rendition once graded, and the sharpness is really beautiful too. Now this is only at setting 3 of the sharpness in C-Log. I'm going to let this go all the way until the max ISO of 12,800, and then I'm going to show you something that I think is really interesting. Okay, now I'm going to put 2 frames side by side, one Canon Standard and one Canon C-Log, both at the 2 highest ISOs available. And you can see the dramatic difference in noise control between C-Log and Canon Standard. Before, when you would be very much limited on what ISOs you could use on the 5D Mark IV, now in C-Log you are unlimited on the ISOs you can use. I think it looks great at 12,800 in C-Log. There's very little noise, it looks very clean, and even though that's not particularly high now in the world of what high ISOs are, it's still quite good for a lot of low light shooting. This is excellent news. I want to close this by talking a little bit about my experiences with the 5D Mark IV and what it has done well for me. And this is another example here of when you're shooting in standard in very bright light, that the way that the camera shows colors, greens, and contrasts is just really punchy, to the point where it really crushes the shadows and blasts the highlights. And it's very hard to recover any data from that unless it's somewhere in the neutral zone in the middle. When you get it to the point where we've got these really bright highlights in the background and really dark shadows up in the foreground, you're not really going to get a lot of detail out of that. But if you shoot in standard and you control all the lighting and you manage to make it all look exactly how you want it to when you capture it, and you don't have to do any post, the 5D Mark IV is totally fine. It's only if you need to push it beyond what looks good straight out of camera that you're going to run into problems. But that's why I'm really happy C-Log exists. In that same shot, C-Log gives us a lot more control to fix things in post than we would get out of standard, and it makes the 5D Mark IV a more viable camera. I actually really do like the 5D Mark IV as a complementary camera to the 1DX Mark II, especially when I'm shooting interviews. I think those two cameras together look really good. Now, the 5D Mark IV definitely crunches blacks way more than the 1DX2, and I'm aware of that when I'm metering and exposing on all my shots, but that's from experience using the camera. The real question is this a bad or a good camera for video? And the answer is somewhere in between. You can make it work if you use C-Log. You can also make it work if you use standard. It's just not great for everything, and it's lacking in 4K P60, and its extreme crop makes it kind of hard to say, yeah, this is a great video camera. But is it in a better place than when it launched? Absolutely. This is a totally viable 4K video camera if you need one.